To call the July 11th meeting of the Economic Development Authority to order. First order of business on the agenda is approval of minutes. However, I'm going to use the chair's prerogative and change that so that we can do introductions around the room, because we have two new directors here today. So I'll start off and model for you. My name is Rudy Garcia. I'm the current chair of the EDA, and I'm entering my 5th year of service on the authority. Lois?
My name is Lois Mastro. I've been here, 2.5 years now, cumulatively. I love it. You will enjoy this. So welcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah.
I'm Brittany Gray, I'm a cat. I've been living here for 25 years. Always wanted to get involved, and here's my first chance to do so.
Ben Hudson, I've been on the authority for a little more than 2 years, and also the treasurer.
Loretta Johnson Morgan, almost at 2 years. So, well, thank you.
I'm Josh Bauer. I lived here in the county for 7 years, myself, my family. And so this is my first meeting, so thank you for having me.
I'm Jennifer Schmack. I'm the Economic Development Director here in Fluvanna County. I have been here since October. Came over from Albemarle County.
Mr. Putnam?
Curtis Putnam, former director, interested person.
So at this time, I'd like to have formally entered in the minutes. Thank you to Curtis for your service.
And can I introduce myself?
Sorry, Valerie, I don't have you in front of me. You're behind me. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Valerie Palamountain. I've been on the EDA for 2 years. Welcome to our 2 new members.
And Valerie's our current co-chair.
I'm the current co-chair.
So if we could enter into the minutes, appreciation for Mr. Putnam's service to the EDA. He led us through a very traumatic time as almost the entire EDA was reconstituted in the last 2 years. So he had the opportunity to be the chair for that, and then passed on that baton to me. So. All right, so second order of business is approval of the minutes from May. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes of 3 minutes for the month of May.
A second,
I second. Please second, please.
Loretta. So any discussion, any corrections to the minutes? I know Lois had sent them out in advance. Hearing none, I'd call the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please state by saying aye. Did you say something?
Aye.
That's right. You would have to abstain.
Yes, so we should abstain from this.
Okay. And chair votes aye, 4-4-0-2.
I don't think I can vote. Jennifer, correct me if I'm
No.
wrong, but I'm not allowed to
No.
vote since
No,
I'm.
Not yet. That's
Sorry.
going to be on the agenda for the August
Okay,
meeting to get
good.
that thing passed.
Great, thank you.
All right. So at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jennifer so she can introduce our speaker.
I can give you that because I'll forget. Okay, so I present to you Sandy McNinch, who recently served as the general counsel for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership in Richmond. In this capacity, she performs all legal functions for VEDP, including the negotiation, preparation, and enforcement of grant performance agreements with Virginia companies receiving economic development incentives. Prior to working for the Commonwealth, Sandy has worked at both Troutman and Saunders LLP and Mays and Valentine LLP, representing localities and developers in negotiating and implementing public-private partnerships, including community development authorities, public-private procurement, and incentive packages. Sandy graduated from the College of William and Mary, Marshall with School of Law with a Doctor of jurisprudence. I told you at some point. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice from Michigan State University. Sandy is a member of the Virginia Bar and Local Government Attorneys of Virginia. She is also a member of the Virginia Economic Developers Association and will be retiring in 3 weeks.
Right, that's why I'm recently former general counsel. The new general counsel started today, so she's general counsel and I'm general counsel emeritus or something. For the next 3 weeks, so it's a little surreal.
You can keep that title for a while. Never this.
I'm sorry,
You can keep that title for a while.
emeritus. Yeah. Maybe we'll go with that. So I've been asked to come here today to talk a little bit about the powers and duties and responsibilities of authorities. And I've been doing this sort of stuff for quite a long time. Back in my bond lawyer days, worked with a lot of authorities just like yours, doing bond issues and other things for the benefit of companies. And it's always been my pleasure. You guys are not elected. You didn't go out and seek this position necessarily. You're doing it because you want to help your communities. So I've always just found that so fulfilling that you would want to do this work. So thank you for doing this work and appreciate your efforts. Let me start a little bit with
It's reverse. It's the bottom one.
the bottom one, right? Okay, good. While I have your attention, I'm going to tell you a little bit about BEDP, just so you'll know where we fit into the ecosystem and economic development of the Commonwealth. We were created by the General Assembly about 25 years ago. We have a 17-member board of directors appointed mostly by the General Assembly and the governor's office. We have about 190-ish full-time employees, might be 200 today, I don't know. We have offices in Virginia, Germany, Japan, South Korea. You have offices in Virginia, Germany, Japan, South Korea. Our CEO is appointed by our board, which is an important thing for them. It's not a political appointment. We are not at all in the political ecosystem of the Commonwealth. We are designed the way we're designed, so we are a step away from the political wind, step low. It is our job to make the governor look good. We don't really care who that person is, frankly. When we want him or her to be supportive of economic development, but beyond that, it's our job to bring capital investment and jobs into Virginia, make the governor look good. Again, really none of that worried about who that person is. So we're not a political entity at all. So the CEO doesn't have to worry about whether or not there's a new governor because he doesn't work for the governor, he works for our board of directors. There we go. We're currently in the third and a half year of a 5-year strategic plan with 5 points to it. The transformational goals that you see over there on the left-hand side. We want robust state growth, so lots of new jobs being created among the highest growth rates in the US. The second one is really the one that's most important to us. It's important to us that every region wins. It's not enough that we create a bazillion jobs in Northern Virginia. We need to do that around the Commonwealth. So we work very hard to make sure that that's the case. We want to be the best state for business, which means chatting with our friends at the General Assembly and the administration to make sure the proper regulations and things are in place. We want to be the top state economic development organization and to be a super collaborator to what, as we refer to as putting the P back in partnership with the UDP. Make sure that we're being good stewards of relationships around the Commonwealth. So that's my story on DDP. So stuff we're going to cover today that Jennifer's asked me to cover. Oops, again. Hold on. Yep, there we go. So we're going to cover these things. So legal constraints, powers, purposes, and functions, common and less common activities. That's sort of the fun stuff, things you can do. Then we're going to talk about the not fun stuff, stuff you need to know, FOIA, conflicts of interest, public procurement, and various sort of miscellaneous things. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so Virginia is a Dillon's rule state, meaning that political subdivisions like yours, you are a political subdivision, have only the powers expressly granted to you by the General Assembly. So to grossly oversimplify, you have to be able to open the Code of Virginia and point at what it is you want to do. You can work a little bit beyond that. So if the code says that you can enter into a contract, for example, then you can certainly negotiate it, sign it, amend it, whatever, you can deal with the contract. But your basic ability to enter into a contract has to be something that you can point to in the code. And we'll talk about a very nice exception to that general rule in a few minutes, but keep that in mind. Dillon's rule can only do what you're told to do. There are 3 constitutional provisions of the Virginia Constitution that will come into play. The first is the credit clause that prohibits the lending of public assets for private purposes. You can look to the animating purpose of a transaction. So if you have spare cash lying around, you're going to invest it in a CD, or you're going to buy a mutual fund or whatever. Those are indeed using public funds for private purposes. Well, that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you need to invest your money somewhere. So we can look to the animating purpose of those transactions. But the general rule is prohibit the lending of public credit for private purposes. The next one is the public purpose clause, not surprisingly, suggesting that public funds should be used only for public purposes. Public purposes include economic development, so that's a recognized public purpose under both the Constitution and Virginia case law. And the third one of those, and we'll talk later about these all come into play, is the uniformity of taxation clause, which is a bit unusual, more common on eastern seaboard states than western states, but would provide that all similarly situated property and taxpayers need to be taxed similarly. So in some states, they just say, oh, just don't worry about paying tax for the next 10 years. But you can't do that in Virginia because all property taxes and property need to be taxed similarly, given some exceptions. So, and again, we'll talk later about how that all comes to play and how you folks can do your work. Okay, now let's talk about some powers and duties. Right, so what's in it now? You folks are an economic development authority, right? There are also industrial development authorities. They are exactly the same thing. They are created under the same act. They just happen to have different names. So if someone says, oh, I'm a member of my locality's IDA, well, they're exactly like you. They just happen to have a different name. Same act, same thing. And you're going to change your name, so you don't need to do that. Just so you'll know, there are other types of authorities under the code. There are regional industrial facilities authorities, which have powers very similar to yours. But the one power they have that you don't specifically have, again, remember, you got to be able to point at something, is they have the power to do revenue sharing. So 2 or more localities could join together to do an industrial park or, whatever, training facility, whatever that might be.
Water Authority.
Hmm?
The James River Water Authority.
Yeah, that would be probably a public service authority.
Oh,
Also, I'm sorry about those here. So public service authorities do water and sewer and sometimes solid waste. Housing authorities, not surprisingly, do housing. Community development authorities do infrastructure and given areas, shopping centers, subdivisions, that sort of thing, sidewalks, lights.
And so if I could just go back to that for a
Sure,
minute. So
yeah,
James River Water Authority is actually 2 localities.
Mhm.
So that would still fall under the public service.
They probably joined together to do a public service authority.
Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Okay, so what's an IDA or EDA? Your enabling act is the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act. Under that act, you are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. You are a separate legal entity. So we were talking about this earlier. You are not the county is not you. You are a separate thing. Usually created by one locality, but you can indeed under the act join with other entities to form one authority or act jointly as separate authorities together on one project. Usually 7 directors appointed by your locality's governing body. So under the Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act, which is your enabling legislation, you have very broad powers. Your animating purpose, I'm just going to read this because it's sort of important, is to promote industry and develop trade, by inducing manufacturing, industrial, governmental, nonprofit, and commercial enterprises and institutions of higher education to locate in or remain in the Commonwealth. I mean, that's a pretty broad thing. Notice it didn't say in Fluvanna County, it said in the Commonwealth. The secondary purpose is you are welcome under the act to assist private entities. Authorities really are, like yours, are uniquely qualified to assist with economic development. And if you want to get into incentives, to administer incentives. Remember, I said earlier that under the Dillon rule, you need to read the Code of Virginia narrowly, so pointing at what it is you want to do. Under the Industrial Development Revenue Bond Act, the General Assembly has invited you to think of your powers expansively. So it says, it gives you enumerated powers, but says, and by the way, if you're doing it for economic development purposes, you can read these things expansively. Very unusual. So it's a power that many others don't have. So what are some of those powers that you have that others don't, that might be helpful for economic development? You have the power to make grants to private entities, to sell properties without holding a public hearing, to lease and sell properties at above or below fair market value, not just to the highest bidder, to issue bonds for the benefit of private entities, to make loans to private entities, and if you're so inclined, to forgive the repayment of those loans, to exercise all your powers beyond the borders of the locality, and to deal with properties statewide. All powers specifically interesting for economic development purposes, all things not granted to the county that created you. So you have powers that go beyond those of the county itself. Okay, so how are you gonna do all these things? Sources of IDA funding. Most authorities, no big surprise here to any of you, I'm sure the table operate on a shoestring. Get contributions of money and property from localities. Sometimes it's tied to particular revenue streams, so the machinery and tools taxes from the authorities, industrial reps. Amherst County had a holy crap moment a few years ago when Sweetbriar announced they were closing. County didn't know that it was about to lose its economic development engine and thought that it needed to up its economic development game. And so it instituted 1 cent on its local real estate taxes, and it dedicated that extra cent to economic development purposes. And they've done interesting things like they cataloged all the commercial properties that are available in the county, along commercial strips and things. And so they now know what's available and what's not, and what a proper use might be and what might not. And therefore can make zoning decisions and other things based on that knowledge. And done other things to prepare for economic development using the proceeds of that extra 1 cent on the real estate tax. Many authorities own industrial parks and other property and get revenues from that. Used to be, back in the day, when I was a bond lawyer, that authorities did lots of bond issues and charged fees for doing that. And that was a reliable source of revenue for many authorities 20 years ago. There are local enterprise zones, technology zones, local defense production zones, and we'll talk about all these different zones later, but the code does say that you can capture, with your board's approval, you can capture a percentage of real property or machinery and tools taxes in those zones and dedicate that money to economic development. Again, a very important thought. You have no power to tax, thank God, because that would, careful what you wish for. No power to tax. There are federal and state grants available from time to time. We have some grant programs mostly focused on site preparation and site development. We have brownfields grants that are available that get used in lots of communities like yours to do phase 1 and phase 2 environmental studies on properties. Sometimes there's a property that's been vacant downtown, whatever downtown means for you, for a while. And it's just kind of scary because no one knows what's in there and what's not. Well, you can get a grant from us to help you identify what's there, make it perhaps a little less scary. And we also have a little money after that to help you actually do something about it. If you need to get the asbestos out of the window frames or whatever it is. So we do have some small grants in that area. We do have larger grants for doing industrial parks and other things. A great feeling in the Commonwealth all these years has been site development in localities. And we've been beating this drum for, I don't even know how long, a very long time. We were successful finally this year at the General Assembly. Over the next 2 years, we've got $150 million coming our way, to finance industrial parks and other commercial properties to prepare them for economic development. It's been a robust time, the last 6 or 8 months or so for mega projects, automotive projects, chip manufacturers, battery manufacturers, just all kinds of things. So to us, mega projects is something over maybe 2 billion, maybe over 2,000-3,000 jobs. We've lost 10 of them this spring, 10, because we had nowhere to put them. We haven't, there's not one single tier 5, ready to rock and roll site of 1,000 acres or more in the Commonwealth, anywhere, period, end of story, doesn't exist. So hopefully this money will let us get there and be able to win some of those projects, because trust me, it hurts when you lose that many. We were, maid of honor on 3 of them, but they all wound up going somewhere else. Second, the second site, but we were not the first site.
Do there other continuing factors like education of the?
All of that comes into play, absolutely. But for a company like, not like Hyundai, which recently announced they're going to Savannah, for which we will curse their names for the rest of our lives. They wanted to be operational, have the factory open, ready to make cars, electric cars, in 24 months. In order to do that, you have to have a site ready today. You got to start pouring footings tomorrow to make that kind of thing work. So you can't tell them, oh, we can get water there in the next 18 months, or we can get power there in a year from now. That ain't gonna work. You have to have the site ready today. But they're not gonna pick just a site. They're gonna pick someplace where they can get the right labor force, training opportunities, a good environment for business, fair tax rate, all those other things that they need. But they gotta have a site, and if you can't go somewhere for sites, for site development.
Sandy, Valerie has her hand raised. She's on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bella. Yep.
Yeah, I have a quick question. You're talking about federal and state grants. What about private foundations or community grants, local funds?
We don't see that much on the site development or infrastructure, I guess I'm gonna call it, front. We often see private foundations helping perhaps with training facilities and training programs, putting their money into people, not things. Not that never happens.
Okay,
but
thank you.
typically people, not things, for foundations.
Thank you.
So in many communities in Virginia, they lost their charitable hospitals, 10, 15 years ago. And the foundations that sprang from that do economic development, but again, it tends to be people related, not site or water and sewer related. Okay, so where are we? Grants, a trend, and no one has mentioned anything to me about this for economic development, but I just wonder, it's been sort of a trend at the General Assembly for localities to go to ask for an extra 1 cent on the sales tax to be collected in the community. And to dedicate that tax to a variety of things. It's usually either school renovation or, in Williamsburg's case, historic tourism stuff. So I wonder if that might be a trend, or if the community just wants to go that way, if there might be an ask to add a 1 cent on the local sales tax for economic development purposes as well. So that opportunity exists, I suppose. Okay, let's talk about common activities. Okay. We're gonna go through each of these in terms of economic development support, product development, which is everything, administering grants and economic development incentive programs, and issuing bonds for private entities and localities. So taking the first of those, ED support, both internal and external. Economic development is absolutely a team sport. Jennifer doesn't do this on her own. She does it with lots of people at the locality and the region and the state and everybody else. Doesn't happen alone. So you folks, as members of the authority, can be a good storytellers in your community and make sure that you're going both ways. So internally, that you're talking to the board of supervisors and other county decision makers to make sure that they understand about economic development and what your needs are. And then externally, just, speaking up at the Rotary meeting or, whatever it is, when you're out and about in the community and making sure that folks know about the issues facing economic development and how they can be impactful and help in that regard. Or listening. So if you're here, 4 times in the same week that people are having issues getting, electric permits or something, whatever, through the county, then you can pass that along. Businesses have said to me, county administrator, that there's an issue with getting electrical permits, whatever it is. So you can be the voice of the business community internally and externally speaking to others. Also externally, as business prospects come to your community, no one can tell them better how to do business and what it's like to do business here than people who already do that. So you may well be asked to make that pitch to companies that are coming to you, to let them know what it's like to do business here. Okay, so product development. Product is really everything, as we talked earlier. It's absolutely the site. It's also workforce. It's proximity to customers and suppliers. It's all the stuff you see there on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side as well. The authority and economic development office cannot possibly tackle all these issues and things, but you need to be aware of the status of all these issues and things, and get help when you need it and plug holes when you can. Also, authorities are often used for the administration of grants. If you want to get into a grant making business, it's at the intersection of sort of Dillon's rule, the credit clause, and the uniformity of taxation clause. So authorities have the express power to make grants for economic development purposes. Again, not a power held by your county. Other states can and do provide direct tax abatements. You can get to the same place if you want to by going through the authority and making a grant equal to a percentage of taxes paid. So you can't say, oh, just don't worry about paying 80% of your taxes, but you can say, well, think about making that in a grant back to you if you do your capital investment in jobs, and we'll pay that same amount back to you. That would be a grant subject to annual appropriation. The grants that I see coming from localities are more often than not tied to local taxes, some percentage of property taxes, some percentage of machinery and tools. And this is how you do that in Virginia. So number one, the tax is assessed by the locality of the company, like any other taxpayer. The company pays its tax like any other taxpayer. The governing body says, hey, the company has agreed with us that if they invested, pick your favorite numbers, $10 million and created 400 jobs, that we were going to pay back to them 60% of the machinery and tools tax. They did what they said we were going to do. We owe them 60% of machinery and tools tax. The governing body then pays the money to the authority. We can point to the provision in the code where counties can support their authorities by providing money to them. The authority pays money to the company because we point to the code where you got their authority to do that. So in a very roundabout way, we've gotten that tax money back to the company, which is the same as a tax abatement that perhaps I would have qualified for in some other state with less cumbersome rules. That's how you do it. And that's why you folks would be particularly important. That. If you're going to get into the grant business, again, it's you, it's the right or wrong idea on any given project. From the Commonwealth's point of view, the things that I see, we're worried about the income taxes paid by all those nice employees, about the sales taxes on the capital investment, but not the machinery and tools because they are typically exempt from sales taxes. From your point of view, it's going to be the real property taxes the company pays, personal machinery and tools taxes. and any other local fees and charging or tapping fees, sewer, that sort of thing. It's not always about the money, but you should know what money's coming in, you should know what your return on investment is, and make wise decisions based on that. For example, we have one program called the Virginia Investment Performance Grant Program at the state level. Excuse me. It's only available to existing companies that have been in Virginia for at least 3 years, manufacturers that are investing at least $25 million. If they're going to do that, they're often putting in a new line of some sort and upgrading a line that was already there, perhaps, may well be firing people. But we know that the modernization of that plant means that they're protecting the remaining jobs that are there. Makes it that project, that facility more viable going into the future. So we're happy to provide grants in those instances, even though we know that from the Commonwealth's point of view, it's probably going to be a money loser because we're not going to get machinery and tools. Might or might not have new jobs, but it's going to help the locality because you'll have more a bigger tax base for your machinery, tools, and property taxes. And you've got an employer who's stronger and ready to fight for the future. So again, it's not all about making money, it's all about knowing what the ROI is and making a decision based on that. If you're going to get into the grant business, you want to be sure you have a performance agreement, and that might seem obvious, but I've seen localities that have just forked over money with no written document, and don't be that community, okay? Can we agree on that? You want to discuss the terms of the company up front. Document the public purpose. We're not doing this because we want to line the pockets of company A. We're doing this because company A's promised to invest, which will create tax revenue, and to hire people, which will create jobs and support families in our community. Describe in excruciating detail what the company has to do to receive the grant award and how much it's going to be and how it's going to get paid out, etc. Many authorities around, it's quite common for authorities around the Commonwealth to have grants for specific programs. These are usually quite small, maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, but they're impactful. Usually tied to a specific behavior that you want to encourage. A lot of times it's for facade improvement in the downtown or in business district area. Sort of the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. And if one guy spruces up his facade, maybe you'll shame the guy next door into doing the same. Signage, Colonial Williamsburg, went through and upgraded the city of Williamsburg went through and upgraded their signage. Lots of people were grandfathered. Actually, I've learned you're not supposed to use that phrase because that's ages. Whatever. I'm going with it. Grandfathered that if you had existing signs, but they wanted people to upgrade to the new signage, so they offered small grants to companies to do the new signs anyway. A lot of COVID recovery grants around the Commonwealth and a couple years ago. A lot of communities have sort of stuck with that and are still offering, again, modest grants to help companies upgrade their websites, to do a lot of businesses had websites at the start of the pandemic, but didn't have payment systems on them. So you could see what they had, but you couldn't buy anything. So their grants have been provided for that. In some cases for restaurants and wineries and such, they wanted to be able to open outdoors. And so some communities have grants for those patio heaters. Make it easier for those businesses to survive. If you're going to get into this business, that's fine. If you want to, my motto in most everything I do is keep it simple, stupid, make it easy to apply, make it easy to comply, and make it easy for everybody to be successful. So you want them to do what you want them to do, but just, don't make everybody crazy. You don't need an 8-page application form and a 20-page annual report. Just keep it simple. Okay, bond financing, not something that's been done an awful lot lately. Maybe that'll change with increasing interest rates, but why bother doing a tax exempt bond issue if your taxable rates, 1.2 or something. So you have the power to issue revenue bonds for private facilities under federal tax laws. Those are manufacturing facilities. What the IRS calls exempt facilities, airports, docks and wharves, sewage, solid waste, things that are privately owned perhaps, but have a public flavor to them, large landfills, that kind of thing, and charitable facilities. Remember, you have statewide powers, so you can issue bonds for facilities that are located elsewhere, and you may well be asked to do just that. This often comes into play for things like the YMCA or the Goodwill or whatever. They want to do 4 facilities in their regional network. They don't want to do 4 bond issues, they want to do 1. So they're going to pick somebody to be the issuer of those bonds. So you may find yourself financing things not located in the county just to help the 501c3 charity do 1 issue, not 4. Also, there's a thing going so deep into the weeds here called bank qualification. For a 501c3, they get a double tax exempt benefit when they issue bonds on their behalf. They get not only tax exempt interest on their bonds, which makes investors willing to provide a lower interest rate, but for bank investors, the bank also gets a separate special tax because it's credit, not related to the interest rate on the bonds, but because the bank also receives that second benefit, the bank is willing to offer a lower interest rate on those bank qualified bonds. There are only but so many dollars in bonds that any one locality can issue in any 1 year to still be bank qualified. So you may well find yourself for a 501c3 located in Richmond, which is going to always have bonds that will of its own needs that will take them over that bank qualified limit. You may get a call from the 501c3 in the city of Richmond saying, we want to issue bank qualified bonds. Can we go ahead and use some of your 20 million to do that? So why not?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
All these revenue bonds or bond financing,
Mhm.
different names for different towns.
Yes.
And they are.
The technical name is private activity bonds, because you are issuing bonds that have your name on them, so, but you have no payment responsibility. They have your name on them, but they are indeed for a private purpose, so they're for private activity, private activity bonds. The manufacturing ones are called small issue private activity bonds. Don't ask me why, that's just what they're called. The ones for exempt facilities are called exempt facility private activity bonds. And the ones for 501c3s are qualified charitable facilities. Don't quote me on that one. Private activity bonds. But the notion is that you folks will be issuing bonds for which you have no payment responsibility to lend your tax exemption to those bonds. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
The tax, the secondary benefit for the banks was something that it lowered their.
So,
Place in the back of my mind is.
okay, so
Lowered their.
generally, a company, any company, would deduct on their taxes the interest they pay on interest that they borrow for their business purposes, right? The general rule is that a bank cannot deduct that interest to the extent it borrowed money to carry private activity bonds. The exception to that exception is that they may indeed still take that exemption for charitable bank qualified bonds.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Usually people don't want to go quite that far, but there you go.
So that would entice our banks here.
Yeah, those are federal rules, so yes, it's not, there's nothing unique about them or Virginia in that respect. Okay. So, these private activity bonds, there haven't been many lately, because the rules for manufacturing exempt facilities are old. manufacturing is, has a very narrow definition, and those bonds are limited to 10 million in size. Which doesn't go, I mean, 10 million is a lot of money, but that doesn't really go very far. We're building a manufacturing facility. So reasons why that. And then we talked a little bit already about doing bonds for 501c3s, whether that's your local private school or private hospital or YMCA's or whatever. And again, we talked about the bank qualified bonds. Okay. A little less common stuff. Okay.
I have a
Um,
question.
sure, yeah.
The bonds for the 501c3s, would that also go for charter schools? Or
It
all
could,
private?
if they're 501c3s, and they probably are,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. If they're religious charter schools, you couldn't do the chapel.
Right.
No, this one's
Yeah.
through our public schools. we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, good, assuming it's 501c3, yes. Okay, some less common stuff, owning and operating business incubators, and you might think that that's more of an urban thing, but it's real, there are a number of rural communities that have business incubators. Some authorities own their local airports, their fixed space operations. Develop local infrastructure, some of them are into the electric vehicle charging station business. In Charles City County, I know they use the money that comes off of their landfill every year and build a fire station in the industrial parks. Fire station is actually owned by the authority. In some localities, the authority runs the economic development function, so Jennifer would not be a county employee, she'd be an authority employee. And authorities assist with specialty zones, again, we'll talk about those in a minute. And owning and financing properties for businesses, with county, for example, just did this for a business in its community. The business had the financing all lined up for its new building. It was looking for help on equipment. So the deal is that the authority is going to borrow money. We'll purchase the equipment, we'll lease it to the company. The company will toss in 15% of the cost of the equipment, so the county is financing 85% of it, or the authority is financing 85% of the equipment. Using lease revenues with the authority, with the company, if you want to go there. Then operating loan programs, less popular today than that used to be. And if you're going to get into local loan programs, they're often tailored to a very specific need, childcare facilities, perhaps. Money comes from a variety of sources. It requires staffing you got to stay on top of these things. It really does require staffing to stay on top of a loan program. So not sure I'm going to suggest you go there, but it's something that other authorities have done and in some cases continue to do. Okay, so we've talked about some of these specialty zones a couple times. They're like, rabbits, they keep multiplying. At the General Assembly, I swear, every year there's 2 or 3 more. So technology zones, tourism zone, local defense zones, housing, yeah. With the exception of the local defense production and support services zone, which actually requires that the company you want to benefit be in the local defense production, support services business. Don't read any of those other words too seriously. So if you want to create a technology zone and incentivize an ice cream store, you go right ahead. It doesn't matter. If you want to do that in a tourism zone, you go right ahead. It doesn't matter. So don't read the technology or the tourism too closely. So what you can do in these zones is to provide local benefits like regulatory relief, maybe relief from setback requirements or parking requirements or reduction on the sewer tap-in fee, or I don't know, whatever it is you might want to do. You can offer BPOL relief or fee reductions and waivers. The zone could be as small as a single business. In the town of Leesburg, it's the entire town. So their ordinance is that the entire town's a technology zone. And these certain kinds of businesses in that entire town can take advantage of, these special things and, whatever they are. They sort of change them every couple of years. I'm not sure what the current menu is. But it's, relief from the setback requirements and and other regulatory relief. And you can do all of that in these zones that you can create, and they're usually administered by authorities, but the zone itself is created by your board of supervisors. The one exception to really need to be in, don't read tourism too carefully, is that the tourism financing program does indeed require a tourism project in a tourism zone. This is a program by which a tourism project can claim a percentage of both the state's and the locality's share of sales taxes coming off that facility. So, excuse me, you've got a guy who's had a $10 million hotel and museum complex. He's got $2 million of cash. He's got $6 million from the bank, but he's trying to fill that last $2 million gap. You can use this sort of program to help fill that gap. So you're going to collect some portion of the state sales tax revenue off the hotel and the museum. Excuse me, a like amount from the local sales tax. The developer will kick in that same amount, and those 3 pots of money are then dedicated through the authority, through you, for the payment of debt service on the debt financing, on the gap financing for that guy. It's 1% of the sales tax on a sort of regular, whatever that means, tourism program project, excuse me. It's 1.5% for tourism projects of regional significance, which are larger and really new this year, put in place for the Kalahari coming to Pennsylvania. It's been in the news. They can capture 2% of the state sales taxes, which for that facility will be huge, one imagines. But you would be involved in these, and it does require a tourism project in a tourism zone. But do you have to, okay, that's the first part of the things you can do presentation. Before I move on to the icky parts, anybody have any questions? Everybody okay? Right. Okay. Confidentiality. Maintaining confidentiality for project companies is critical. We're in the problem solving business. Company needs a new location. It needs a new workforce. It needs help negotiating with DEQ, environmental matter. It needs whatever it needs. It won't tell us what those problems are if it's afraid about reading those problems on the front page of the newspaper. So we have to be able to maintain that confidentiality. And what, imagine if a company's tired of the tax rates and the union wage levels and business regulation in New York and wants to pick up and move its operations to Virginia. We're all for that. That's a lovely idea to us. But as soon as they announce it, the employees in New York are going to freak out. The customers in New York are going to freak out. The vendors are going to freak out. Everybody's going to freak out. So the company is going to want to be able to be thoughtful about how it makes those announcements and the information that it shares with folks on a timely basis. If it's a publicly traded company, they're going to run afoul of the Securities and Exchange Commission if material information gets out to the market unevenly. So you can create a problem for them that you don't want to create by talking about their business in a way that they're not ready for. Known interest in the site is, of course, going to drop its price. Loose lips sink ships. I can't remember a time that we've lost a project because someone blabbed about it, but I could certainly think of at least 3 occasions where our friends in North Carolina have blabbed about a project, so the company just skipped across the state lines. Happy to take them on. For casual inquiries from people, here's our standard response. For competitive reasons to protect confidential company information, we cannot comment on current or potential economic development prospects. So if someone sees you at lunch with some business prospect and the person asks you the next day, hey, I saw you having lunch, who was that? For competitive reasons, we cannot tell you about what we're doing for economic development. Okay, so a little bit, not contrary, but needs to be woven in carefully to that is the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. It's in 2 parts. The first part provides ready access to public records held by a public body. The second part speaks to free entry to meetings of public bodies. The authority is a public body. Each director must be provided with a copy of FOIA upon appointment or reappointment and read and become familiar with it. Looking at you over there, Kat. I know you said you had trouble reading it, but power on, girlfriend. So need to do that. Oftentimes I get asked, well, is our regional economic development group subject to FOIA? And the answer is I don't know, because they're typically private 501c4 organizations. And they would not be subject to FOIA if they get, I should do it the other way, because I'm not sure I can do the double negative. They are subject to FOIA if they get 66% or more of their money from government sources. So if the only people contributing to the regional organization are counties, cities, and towns, then that organization is going to be subject to FOIA, even though it's a private corporation. But for a large community like Richmond, where it gets a lot of money in this regional organization from private companies, that would not be the case.
I have a question that might be in the training. Our personal cell phone subject for you.
We'll get to that in just a second. Hang on there. Okay. New in 2020, you guys. So everyone now needs to take a course on FOIA. You need to take it for new folks within 2 months of assuming office. Everyone else needs to take it every 2 years. You probably took it 2 years ago, so it might be about time to go ahead and get that little puppy done again. And you can get that training off of the FOIA Council website. New in 2022, you need to post your minutes on an official government website or make a hard copy available in 7 working days. And if you're, we'll talk later about charges for FOIA requests. If you're going to have a charge, you need to tell the requester upfront and ask if they want an estimate. 2 things new in 2022. So if we are a public body and we're required to fork over public records, what's a public record? It's all writings and recordings, whether hard or electronic, prepared by or in the possession of a public body for the transaction of public business. Letters, emails, database entries, texts, any electronic or paper thing you might have that's related to the authority is a public record. Even ones that are hiding in your deleted items in your on your computer. What's not a public record? Your brain cells are not a public record. What you think about something is not a public record. Your recollections of what happened is not a public record, unless you wrote it down, in which case that is a public record. So don't save voicemails. Don't take notes you shouldn't be taking. You owe no one an explanation. FOIA is about forking over pieces of paper or emails or whatever public records. It's not about why did you do something. It's here's what we did. Here's the paper. You'll want to keep any snarky comments in your brain cells. You do not want to write down in an email what you thought of that company representative. You don't want to write down in your email anything, remember what your mom said. You can't see something nice just yet. Don't put it in writing anywhere at all. We've gotten hit by this a few times. We had one case a few years ago where the project manager referred to the company representative as being a bitch, which she indeed was. In his defense, she absolutely was. We get a FOIA request for all the emails and documents for that project. Out they go. The reporter called her and said, "Phoebe thinks you're a bitch. What do you think about that?" And she was very gracious. Oh, I was just a strong negotiator on behalf of my company. And no, she was a bitch, but you don't want to have to write those apology letters. Just don't write that stuff down anywhere. We had another one, a Chinese company where the principals were a Mr. Wang and a Mr. Tang. The jokes wrote themselves. I'm sorry. And again, I understand our project managers might have fallen off the wagon. But again, FOIA request comes in, I'll go to the emails, and again, heartfelt apology letters being sent, yeah, especially for an Asian company, you just don't want to put yourself there. Be careful. Actually, we had a recent scare. I remember Governor Northam had his little black face thing. If I'm remembering correctly, that story broke on a Friday afternoon. The following Friday afternoon, we get a FOIA request for all emails of BDP during the prior week that mentioned the governor. I'm like, holy crap. Because I know my employees thought about that, and I can tell you that. So ask for all emails mentioning the governor, and we had lots of them because we were sending the governor a week or two hence to a trade mission in India, and he approves all of our grants. So there are lots of emails mentioning the governor, not a single one mentioned his blackface issue. I've never been so proud of a group of people in my life. So if it's unpleasant and doesn't need to be written down, just right. Hardware does not matter. Authority related emails on your home computer are public records. Authority related emails on your work computer are public records. Authority related emails sent receiving a personal email account are public records. Authority related texts on your personal cell phone are public records. Meaning that if you get a FOIA request for something that is reflective of texts on your phone, you're going to be forking your phone over to Jennifer so that she can get those texts and send them out to the requester. So just be careful. And
That's happened before.
yeah,
Not here, but in another
yeah,
town.
it does happen. You had mentioned earlier that you have a county email account. Do all authority members?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good
Two are
thing to
being
do.
set up.
Right, and so that's, it's not gonna save you from not having a public record on your home computer or whatever, but you'll at least know where everything is in one handy dandy little place, so that's good hygiene to go ahead and do that. The request. So we have to disclose all public records requested unless an exemption exists. And we'll talk about exemptions in a minute. The request need not invoke FOIA, need not be written, need not be directed to a particular person. So someone can walk in the front door over here and shout, I want to see a copy of the performance agreement I read about in the newspaper. That's a FOIA request. Someone needs to know that and to respond to that person appropriately. After scratching their heads, I wonder. The one that makes me crazy is the motivation for the request is irrelevant. I get a lot of them because I have cabinet secretaries and folks on my board. I get them all the time that are just politically motivated. One of my employees is a spouse of a United States congressman from California. So I get opposition research emails or FOIA requests about her with some regularity. Don't mind spending my time worrying on responding to a FOIA request for someone who's interested in economic development, but to do so they can score political points against one of my employees is really galling. We only have 5 working days to respond to a FOIA request. So even for the simplest of them, it's a drop what you're on doing and get on it thing. We can ask for a 7-day extension, and we can negotiate a longer period of time with the requester. So for us, even if it's the guy who walks in and wants a copy of the performance agreement he read about in the paper, for us, we need to get the performance agreement, which of course takes a minute or two. We would, as a matter of practice, tell the company, we've gotten a FOIA request about your performance agreement. We're going to turn loose of it. Just want to let you know that, and give them a day or two to absorb that, get ready for the whatever fallout they might have, and then get back to the requester. So it just takes time, even though for those simplest ones. Trust me, the requests are seldom well written. We can ask for clarification from the requester, or my personal favorite is, we assumed you meant this. So you can either ask or just tell them what they meant. I usually just tell them what they meant. The public record may be requested by a Virginia resident or a media representative, which is TV, radio, magazines, newspapers with distribution in Virginia, not bloggers, not other folks who fancy themselves to be news people. You don't, it's not a FOIA request if it's somebody from California asking something. So you've got two choices. You can either tell the person you're not a Virginia resident, go away, which is just going to get them to ask Aunt Mary, who happens to live in Norfolk, to do the same request 10 minutes later. Or you can say, lovely idea, we would happy to help you with that. And don't worry about the 5 days, don't worry about anything, just get to it when you're done, when you feel like it. So that's what we do. So we do indeed respond to them in our own sweet time. Yeah, that's what we do. And alluded to earlier, new in 2022 is before conducting research. If you're going to charge them, you must tell the requester that you're going to do that and how you're going to charge, how you're going to assess their fees. You can charge reasonable fees, whatever that means. For us, that at VDP, that means usually it's $45 an hour for staff time. And we don't worry about whether the staff was my admin or me or the project manager, or the average hourly wage of our salaried employees is greater than 45. So we just don't worry about who it is. We just charge 45. Copies you can charge for, usually not the case that you have a fee for database search, but if you're using someone else's database, then there might be a charge, or whatever it is. You're welcome to charge your fees. If it's going to be for more than 200, and some of ours are, you can request that money in advance, and that can also be used sometimes to your advantage. And we got one, thankfully I didn't follow through, shortly after the Amazon HQ2 decision, interestingly, from the Washington Post, asking for everything having to do with HQ2. I'm like, well, go ask your freaking boss, you know. But anyway, we had over 40,000 emails, more than double that text. We had a lot of stuff, and so we told the reporter, happy to do that. It's going to take us months to plow through that. Your fee is going to be well into 6 figures. Do you still want to proceed? And his answer was no, don't we want to. So you can use that to your advantage sometimes. But I mean, that I would still be doing that 3 years later and still be going through those emails. Okay, so and I would be going through those emails because I would be looking for things that we can redact from all those public records. And so we can take advantage of the exemptions. FOIA allows you to take advantage of exemptions. It doesn't require you to do so unless it's like Social Security numbers or something like that. But so here's the primary economic development exemption. And it is really hard to see on the screen and even on your piece of, well, it isn't because you didn't make the copies in color. At the end of the second line, there's a semicolon there. Everybody see the semicolon there? I put it in red, but that didn't really help, did it? There are two things going on here. Everything before the semicolon is that we are allowed to redact and not send out proprietary information sent to us by companies. So they can tell us their problem. We don't have to tell the world what the problem is. And then after the semicolon, it's stuff that we do with that proprietary information. So the project manager made their own list of, synthesize the information from the company on the job skills that were needed and how many welders they needed and whatever the wage rate might have been. And so those sorts of records that we generate on our own based on that proprietary information need not be turned loose either. So two things going on here from the company and stuff that we did based on information from the company. Other exemptions that come into play from time to time, contracts and contract negotiations. The final contract, if you're using public funds, is a public document. It's going to go flying out the door. But you don't have to negotiate in public. You can keep those things quiet until they get signed. Executive working papers. So to the extent you're working on documents, summarizing for decision makers what it is you might want to do, you can keep that information quiet under an exemption. The financial documents from a private company submitted with a request for bond financing can be held confidential. public records are recorded for a closed meeting, and we'll talk about closed meetings in a minute. Trade secrets from a company with earmarking, and that's a little bit different than the proprietary information. Certainly the earmarking is different. So what I mean by earmarking is that for trade secrets, a company can send you trade secrets and say, we consider this to be a trade secret. And if you want to be able to protect it under FOIA, you would then write back to them and say, yes, we agree with you. That certainly looks like a trade secret, and we agree with you that we will keep that from disclosure. Then they'll send it to you and you can go on your merry way. That sort of earmarking doesn't work for economic development projects because we receive proprietary information from companies on the fly all day, every day. You're standing at the site, it says, this is a lovely site. I wonder if I'll be able to find, 300 welders. And you go, don't tell me that. I hear you're about to tell me something proprietary. Shut up and tell me and decide how it is we want to treat that. So it doesn't work for economic development, that sort of earmarking notion. Every couple of years, the FOIA Council says we should put that earmarking notion into the proprietary exemption. So we fight that every couple of years. General Assembly's largely made up of lawyers, so written advice by legal counsels. We don't confidential as well. So how does this come to play with non-disclosure agreements, which companies often ask for? Usually the larger ones, smaller ones don't always ask. The non-disclosure agreements cannot trump FOIA. FOIA will trump them. Again, we talked about FOIA allows you to protect proprietary information, and NDA will likely require that you do so. We have our own very simple standard form that we use for NDAs. Companies often will send us theirs because they're familiar with that and want to start there. We always make changes, always. Make sure they're governed by Virginia law. For us, I need to add the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission. I need to add my internal auditor as folks we could talk to. I need to add the localities as folks we could talk to. So I need to do a lot of things that are entirely likely not in their form. So don't be afraid. A company won't mind that you push back on their form if you can explain rationally with straight face why it is you're pushing back. For some of them, their form NTAs are not written with an economic development project in mind. Therefore, they're sharing a widget with the guy next door so that you can see if you can make the widgets, faster and cheaper, whatever. We're not doing that. We've got people we need to talk to and things we need to do and to bring folks together. Remember that team thing, to see if we can help the company. So we really do need to be able to talk to a variety of people, and their standard form is just not likely going to work. So don't worry about changing it. Do reasonable things and tell them why you're doing the reasonable things. Let's see. Okay. On to public meetings, which is the second part of FOIA. A gathering of 3 or more directors at which public business may be discussed as a public meeting, even if it's 3 of you meeting up at the grocery store on a Saturday morning. If 3 of you are meeting up at the grocery store on a Saturday morning, don't talk about authority business because you're having a meeting, and you don't want to be having a meeting unless you've given notice in the local newspaper and have and are taking minutes, neither of which you are doing, most likely. So just knock it off. And the 3, it gets reduced to 2 if the quorum is less than 3. So don't create a 2 or 3 or 4 member committee, because you'll never be able to get any work done, because 2 of them cannot talk to set the date for a meeting because they're having a meeting if they're trying to set the meeting. So just be wary of creating small groups. It includes committee meetings. It might include ribbon cuttings and other places where more than 2 of you are together. If you're having a public meeting, it needs to be open to the public, and 3 days prior notice must be provided, which again, you're not going to do if you met up at the grocery store. You are having right now a public meeting. You have not invited members of the public to speak at a public hearing. You can do that if you want to, but you're not required to allow members of the public to speak at your meeting generally. You must have written minutes, and these same rules don't apply to county staff, just to appointed and elected officials. So conduct of meetings. You cannot vote by proxy. Not vote except for a straw poll in a closed meeting. To take formal action on a closed meeting, you need to reconvene in an open meeting. We'll talk again in a minute about closed meetings, when you can get into one. Form is substance. The rules are kind of crazy, but they're very specific and you just follow the rules, even though they're kind of crazy and specific. You have to cite the FOIA exception going in. You have to read a certification coming out, and that coming out requires a roll call vote. There's $1,000 civil penalty personally for each of your members, each of you, if you improperly certify coming out of a closed meeting. So if you went into a closed meeting and just talked about all manner of stuff that had nothing to do with the closed meeting topic, and when you come out, certify that, oh no, we didn't discuss anything else, and someone figures that out and calls you on it, it's $1,000 fine. Be aware. Never seen anyone actually get charged for that, but it's there. So when can you go into a closed meeting and kick everybody out of the meeting? Sorry, people, but we can kick you out sometimes. You remember the primary economic development exception for public records, that proprietary information. If you're discussing that proprietary information, you can do that in a closed meeting. The acquisition or disposition of real property. And there is a FOIA council ruling that the acquisition or disposition of real property means the acquisition or disposition of real property. So if you're talking about something other than acquiring or selling land, you're developing the land, you're renovating the land, constructing it, those are not acquiring, disposing, and therefore you can't do that in a closed meeting. Just telling you what they said. If you're discussing a prospective business or the expansion of an existing business where no previous announcement has been made, you can do that in a closed meeting. The award of a public contract, I think, can be done in a closed meeting. And again, general assemblies made up of lawyers, consultation with legal counsel can be done in a closed meeting. Okay, electronic participation. We talked about this earlier today. Individual members can ask to join electronically for health or personal reasons. The first of them is a medical condition of the member, him or herself, a medical condition of a family member that the member is required to provide care, a personal matter described to the meeting chair, which could be most anything. You know, I've got a flat tire on the way to meeting, or I'm on vacation to Tahiti, or whatever. And new in 2022, the member lives more than 60 miles from the meeting site. You probably have most of your meetings in the county, so I can't imagine that would come into play often, but if you decided that you're going to have a meeting because you're at the VITA Day at the General Assembly, so someone could join that meeting electronically because that would be more than 60 miles away. During an emergency, you have a bit more latitude, as you probably did during the recent unpleasantness. New in 2022, but not for local public bodies. You have the latitude to hold all virtual public meetings. The definition of local public bodies includes your counties and cities governing bodies, and then it also specifically calls out and says it can't be used by planning districts, school boards, and boards of zoning appeals. I think it's the list, but it doesn't say authorities, industrial development authorities. So one could argue that you're not a local public body for this purpose and could indeed do a public or an all virtual meeting, but I'm not sure I want the version doing that. So maybe you can ask the FOIA council if that's something you want to do. If you're going to invite people to join, I should have said this, electronically, you have to have a policy for doing that allows them to do that. And you need to be fairly consistent in using that policy. The policy will say that, if one of these four things happens, that the member may notify the chair, and the chair can decide, especially for number 3, whether or not the chair feels like allowing the member to join based on that. That excuse. And there's, if it's for that personal matter, they can do it no more than twice per calendar year or 25% of the meetings of the public body. If you're going to do that, you have to have a quorum of warm bodies. So that otherwise, if you'd had a policy in place, etc., your one member joining by Zoom would have been fine because you have more than 4 people gathered here. But everybody can't say, "Oh, I'm sick today," and can't do it. 7 members can't all be sick at the same time.
Valerie has her hand raised.
I'm sorry.
Valerie has her
Yes.
hand raised.
I have a
That's right.
question about, is, with the electronic participation, is that a policy that we can adopt as the EDA, or does it have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors?
Oh, you are you. You do you. So you should have your own policy. You are not the county. The county is not you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, procurement and conflicts. Okay, this is real. I know this is hard, especially in small communities. Part of your job as a member of the authority is to help make connections. You want to make connections. You want to see the big picture. You want to say, "Oh, this company's coming to town and they're going to need an accountant. Let's make sure that they get hooked up with somebody. Oh, they're going to need a machine shop. There's one just down the street. Let's make sure that they know about that opportunity." Making those sorts of connections is part of your job. But you want to make sure that you're motivated by the desire to make those connections and not by any sort of personal well-being. And I know this is hard in smaller communities. I once worked on a bond issue for St. Paul's College, HBCU in Brunswick County. 7-member authority, right? One of the members is the president of the college. One of the members is the president of the bank that was making the loan. One was the president of the contractor that was building the building. I'm like, geez,
So
Louise,
it left you,
people.
left you with the quorum of 4, right?
Exactly, left me with 4, yeah. Hey, geez, Louise, people. So I know it's hard in smaller communities. Okay, so the Conflict of Interest Act is so confusing. It prohibits certain contracts and transactions by authority members with public entities. There's not a bright line between those two things. So a contract is generally a more specific thing involving the expenditure of public money. You're going to sell a piece of land to somebody, you have a contract for that, right? As opposed to the transaction might be, we're going to think about developing a industrial park. So you haven't bought the land yet or anything, but you're just talking about doing that. So that's something the authority is going to be doing. So that's a transaction generally. We'll talk a little bit about conflicts and abstention. Directors must be provided with a copy of the Conflicts of Interest Act, like FOIA, upon appointment or reappointment, and read and become familiar with it. New in 2022, as you well know, is the obligation to file annual reports and to take training every 2 years. Again, the training for you folks who were around 2 years ago is probably coming due again shortly. So yay, you get to take training again. For you new folks, you need to take it within 2 months of taking office. And then report that training to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. You should have all done a long form statement of economic interest. Again, required every year, and for new folks as a condition to assuming office. Filing the long form as opposed to the short form, which in years past is what authority members would have done, also subjects you to the $100 gift limit, which says generally that you can accept gifts having no more than an aggregate value of $100 from any one donor in any one calendar year. So if Bob takes you to dinner in February and spends $50 on you for a lovely dinner somewhere, you need to have written that down somewhere so that you know that if Bob invites you out to play golf in the fall, that those things together cannot be more than $100. What I do is key, because I'm also a long form reporter, and so I have to keep track of this $100 gift limit. I keep a very simple spreadsheet of really every kindness bestowed upon me during the year. Even if it's less than $100, even if it's less than 20 and therefore technically not a gift. The box lunch from when you go on a company tour, the mug the guy hands you when you're on a company or a tour of a facility, the Bob's dinner, Bob's golf outing. I write all of that down so that at any one period of time, I'll know where I stand on the $100 limit in a particular donor. And maybe it doesn't violate any of the rules, but maybe it's just starting to smell bad. If someone buys you a box lunch every Thursday, well, it's not a gift, but at some point it starts smelling bad. So if you keep a list, you can kind of keep yourself in line with what's going on. So suggestion, yeah. I just reached out down there, yeah.
This was very confusing.
Oh my gosh,
So-
really, you think? Yeah.
Because we kind of all serve in different capacities in different places. So is this everything our entire life? Or is it just as we're serving as a EDA? As a EDA
If you
director?
think it's being provided to you as a member of the authority, then you should,
Okay, so it's
think like-
only as.
yes,
this
so
role,
you have a
so
personal life and I'm
Right,
not worried
we
about your
got-
wife giving you,
That's
right.
what I'm filling out. Where do we start and stop? It's because we all do like regular jobs and that's.
Right, right.
So, okay, so it's only as a EDA director, that's the only time that we should be.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but
That's
again,
what I
I would sort of think of that expansively, because that,
Right, but if you go to lunch with somebody and they talk about EDA,
you
You gotta-
should know what that is.
Understood.
Yeah.
So,
it is
Mhm.
kind of squishy though.
It's very squishy and the rules are contradictory.
Better to
They're
err on the side of
confusing.
keeping too many records on it.
Yes. Amen, brother. Okay. Okay. You cannot use for your own economic benefit, non-public confidential information acquired in this. Obvious, I shouldn't have to say that. Be wary of any business gift over 20. If it's less than 20, it's not a gift. You cannot accept a business opportunity where there's a reasonable likelihood that the opportunity is being afforded to you in connection with your authority duties. You cannot do business with the authority itself, except for certain fixed price and contracts for goods and services. There are landmines for doing business with businesses, doing business with the authority. Just check with your county attorney or the FOIA or the COIA council before you do that. For a personal interest in a transaction, again, something more general than the specific contract. Or a personal interest, meaning it's going to be worth more to you than 5,000 in a transaction. You should recuse yourself from that transaction. You should identify for the authority what that conflict is. Note the conflict in the minutes. Don't vote and don't participate in a closed meeting. Don't discuss the matter with other authority members. And disclose that item on your financial disclosure forms. There's no need to recuse and to do all and everything I just said. If your financial impact is as a member of a larger group, so what an example of that be? The authority is going to give grants to everybody who has red hair, who happen to have red hair. Well, they think specific about that. They didn't do that because they love you. They just did it because you had red hair. So for that sort of general thing, you need not go through all that recusal thing that we just talked about. For a personal interest in a contract, a more specific thing with the authority where public funds are being expended on your behalf, you can't do it unless it's just your own employment agreement or sales or services under a fixed price contract. So if the authority says we need to buy 20,000 paper clips this year and the price we're willing to pay is X, then you can sell paper clips to the authority at X. I don't know, don't bring me so many paper clips. You never know. Never know what she's doing over there, building a
You haven't seen her paperclip.
collection,
Necklace, huh?
right, exactly, right. Making chainmail out of it. The Public Procurement Act, you are subject to the Public Procurement Act, so goods and services purchased by you for the authority purposes, it either has to be acquired by competitive bid or competitive negotiation. Most authorities work through their county or city, and I would suggest you do that. The rules are long and complicated, and you don't want to learn them, so just work with the county on that and follow their rules. And there are exemptions for small purchases and sole source contracts.
What's the definition of small purchase?
It depends on what kind of contract it is, 20,000, generally speaking, kind of, sort of. But it depends. Ethics in public contracting, I don't need to tell you guys this, you know, no line cheating or stealing. Okay, let's see. Miscellaneous, you should take your oath of office. Get on, Josh, if you guys have taken your oath yet. Okay, great. The act is a little unusual in that it requires an oath upon reappointment. Many authorities don't have to do that. So if you've been around for 20 years and have taken your oath once, you know, rethink that. You have a lot of powers. You've got a lot of power to do stuff, again, way beyond what your locality does. With that should come great responsibility. Be transparent when you can, but you can't always. Be inclusive and welcoming, follow the rules. The people in Halifax made a presentation to a VEDA meeting not too long ago and suggested these as their 5 guideposts, and it seemed like a pretty good listing to me, so sharing with you. And resources, BDP's website, the Council of Development Finance Organizations, and circulating. This is their weekly newsletter. They have several newsletters. This is their general one. Comes out every Thursday. And it covers topics that you would find, some of them won't be interesting at all, but some of them will be interesting to you. CDFA is a nationwide trade group of organizations like yours. People who do economic development finance. They also have on their website a wealth of information, and they have other more specific newsletters. So if you're interested in brownfields, for example, they have a brownfields newsletter. So go on the website someday when you have nothing better to do and see what's there and sign yourself up for a free newsletter. So also, area development also has a weekly newsletter. Typically comes on, not necessarily, but typically comes out on Fridays. And that's the one that came out last Friday. You might again find some like topics, and they do a better job covering not only the latest economic development project in this state or that state, but also some what's the latest thinking on reshoring or whatever. So they do some higher level analysis as well. Site Selection Magazine also has a free newsletter. It comes out less often, so I didn't provide you a copy of that one. Our friends at the Department of Housing and Community Development run a lot of economic development programs, so I provided you with their website too, because there's a lot of information there as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is about it.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Like, just see in this paragraph, they're talking about computer skills.
Mhm.
And I get every day multiple technology emails. And they talk about, this city's doing it, or the state's doing it, or the school's doing it, and it's all related to this.
Mhm.
And it's anything from cybersecurity to good old-fashioned STEM.
Mhm.
If this, obviously, a skilled workforce is extremely important. What can we do about that?
The number one thing you can do is to know what's going on in your community and build bridges if need be. So is your local school superintendent cognizant of the fact that his or her students are going to have to go out in that technology world? And are courses being offered at the high school level for that? Are they taking advantage of the programs that exist already, that would allow high school seniors or juniors and seniors to take courses at the local community college, so that when they graduate from high school, they also have a associate's degree.
I believe code does that for all state of the states.
Mm.
And Arkansas, believe it or not, is number one offering those kind of courses. Virginia is middling. But I mean, can we do something that's kind of a grant, make arrangements with our community and UVA and all the, VCU? I mean, can we literally do something for, besides awareness, something for this county to make it a hub that, okay, we've got the skills, we've got the people, look at us, and area development and site development,
Yes.
comes calling,
Yes,
or we
I
pay
guess,
them.
I guess I'm thinking in two respects from what you just said. One, it's marketing. Here are the skills that our workforce already has and are earning as we speak. So businesses know that we have these skills already here, and we have a pipeline of them coming along for future hiring. So certainly could do that marketing. Again, having knowledge of what's available in the community and what the resources are. And you can certainly put together a training program. You've got broad powers under your act. You can certainly do a training program if you want to. I suspect that given the number, and there, I was gonna say dozens, scores, I don't know if there's hundreds, but there's a whole bunch of them out there. I suspect that expanding, taking advantage of existing programs is probably going to be the cheaper, easier, faster way to do that.
Every state so far, and I shouldn't say that, I take that back, but I know Virginia has, they put in a technology person in the governor's, okay, which you obviously
Actually, Virginia did away with theirs a couple years ago.
didn't they just put them back in?
So now there used to be a Secretary of Technology and
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought something.
there's still people who are thinking about technology, but they did away with the Secretariat.
Okay, all right, I apologize. I thought something happened like.
Yeah.
Okay, please,
Fair reaction, this one.
back to the
Yeah.
meeting.
Something happened, all right.
Okay, you said set up a program. Who do we talk to? We don't have the financial resources to create a program. I mean, help.
I'm not sure where to send you for that. If there's a program that you've seen that you admire, I would start there. One that you've heard about, one that you've read about, one that you've seen, one that you've met a graduate from. I suspect that's a good place to start. There are workforce councils in every community, that might be a place to start. The SBDC, the Small Business Development Centers probably are aware of all of those opportunities.
Where do we get money?
Well, there's
The
like
big
Go
question.
Virginia, Go Virginia has money, but
Yeah,
that's
for
more of a
that.
regional
But they've been doing
collaboration.
a lot of training. Yeah.
So there are some programs out there, Culpeper, Nelson, Orange, Louisa just got some money for a regional collaboration effort to do with their community college. So in that sense, we can go and write a program, but we have to show a regional need. There's also other avenues that we can look at. Just based on what we identify that need to be.
Yeah, having an educated, skilled workforce.
Right.
Problem is we educate them and we have no jobs for them, so they leave.
It's a chicken and egg thing for
It
sure.
is, definitely. Because we have a lot of kids graduating with AAs.
Mhm.
And a lot of kids taking advanced certifications, but there's no jobs for them here in the county, so they go to work someplace else.
True.
So. but Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
it
hope
was
that was helpful.
excellent.
So I am going to ask that we recess for about 5 minutes, because we've been at this for about an hour and 45 minutes. Take a stretch break, a
Sorry,
bio
was I not
break,
supposed to?
and come back and
Let's talk faster.
knock out the rest of the agenda.
You did a great.
Valerie, hang in there.
Thank you so much. it's a lot of it's like second nature for me now, but you know, definitely a good refresh for a little bit. And you know, there's some people that think, Thank you.
haven't gotten anybody to get it yet, because this girl didn't complete it, but it's open, yeah. They can get it.
That's
in
good to know.
January. And that's really is an emphasis of the school system.
Yeah.
For toward that. It's so hard getting kids to do even advanced placement classes.
Mhm.
They're not as popular, because you got to pass and you make it a certain point. So the thing is to
Dual enrollment's a
dual
ticket.
enrollment,
Yep.
definitely. And those teachers who teach those courses have to have a certain certification.
Well, it's good to know, because I was asking that question at the sheriff's office the other day, because a lot of them get like those criminal justice degree
Yeah.
in high school and then transfer to a 4-year degree.
All right, let's reconvene. And I believe, Ben, you are up next. And we'll do the budget in new business, not under treasurer's report. Okay. So if you could pull up the treasurer's report. Or is
Oh,
it
we've
in
got it in our
packet?
packet.
It's in our packet. Okay.
I have a fancy computer too, so, but basically, the deposits for, over, since our last, meeting in April, we had a total of, primarily 3 deposits. One from the Montessori School, these are all bonds, payments, for $750. Another deposit from the soccer organization in Charlottesville for $1,000, and a third one from the board of supervisors, and that's the allotment, the annual allotment of $1,000 plus reimbursements of $210 for wire transaction fees. And then, of course, you see some interest payments. With those deposits, it raised the new balance to $26,924.17. There's one bond payment that probably should be on there. It's not, and that is from Region 10. We're still waiting to hear from Region 10 on their bond payment of $1,000. All checks written have been presented to the bank. So the number you see at the bottom is the actual number. Just the other item I have that's connected with the treasurer's report is that we have received 2 invoices. One invoice from our annual liability insurance agency, and the second from the Valley Publishing Company. The first one from the liability is for $500, and of course the ad payments for the Fluvanna Review / Valley Publishing is for $950.
Okay.
So at some point in time, at the chairman's discretion, I'd like to seek approval from the directors to make payment for both of those.
Why don't we run that up underneath the
have-
treasurer's report? So if we go ahead and make a motion to get a second, we'll put that as.
Yeah, I did a little fancy. I did a little fancy little. If I can find it. I did a. Yeah, here it is. I did a motion sort of thing.
Okay.
Okay, so I sent it to the chairman and the vice chair, and these are the motions. So,
Ben, can you send it to me too?
yes, ma'am, I'll send it to you. The first motion is from, it's Virginia, Risks, RISK, and that is the Virginia liability insurance that we pay every year. And I'll just go ahead and read the motion. I move that the EDA approve $500 in payment to the Virginia Department of Treasury for liability coverage from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Second by Josh.
Josh.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Got 6 and 0. 1 abstention.
The second item is the Valley Publishing,
Thank
and this
you.
is for ads. This is the ads that the EDA typically put into the, Valley Publishing is the company that sort of runs the finance and these fall Fluvanna review, just so that you know. And I guess over the last 6 months, 7 months or so, we put in certain number of ads that run periodically. And for whatever reason, we have not been able to keep those, but it was discussed between Jennifer, the chairman, and a representative over at Valley Publishing. And the figure that we owe to Valley Publishing is for $950. And that's been, like I said, been sort of reconciled between Valley Publishing, the chair, and Jennifer. With the chairman's approval, I'd like to propose a motion. I move that EDA approve a $950 payment to Valley Publishing to cover EDA ads published in the Fluvanna Review newspaper from November 2021 to June 2022.
A motion on the table. Do I have a second? Second by Loretta. Just some back history for the two new directors. We had an arrangement with the Fluvanna Review where we were partnering with the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Office, and us to run the business corner on a regular basis in the Fluvanna Review. The Fluvanna Review lost our account manager, and the new account manager wasn't able to kind of sort out who was supposed to pay what. And so we had a lot of back and forth, and we finally figured it out. So this is just to go on record, to put the approval in place. So having said that, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a motion to approve, or call for the vote to approve the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, 6-0 and 1.
Okay,
One
so-
abstention.
Subject to your questions, that concludes my presentation.
The chair's report is going to be kind of short and sweet. At our next meeting, we will be voting on the bylaws. We will, Lois, you and I and Jennifer need to get together to update the bylaws and send them out for review prior to the next
I
meeting.
think we have to do a public notice. I need to check on that,
Okay,
but we'll check with Jim.
but we can still send out the draft.
Yes.
You may want to make that a committee of 3.
All she's going to do is just
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
It's just a formality to make it a committee of 3.
add it. Okay,
Isn't that a public meeting?
Yes. It's a public meeting if it's 2.
no, it's the other way around, Valerie. If it's more than 2, it's a public meeting. Because we have 7, our quorum is 4.
Where's Sandy?
She left already,
Don't worry.
after she made our
Okay.
heads hurt.
I know.
So that's really all I have as far as the chair report. Just that we have to redo the bylaws. And I'm gonna turn it over to you, Jennifer, for the county report.
There's a lot of activity going on here recently. I'm sure you've heard about the different rezonings and projects going on throughout the county. There's interest in the Pork Union area, Lake Monticello, a lot of projects happening up in the Zion Crossroads area. In addition to that, we had 2 new businesses, ribbon cuttings for 2 new businesses in June for Bump to Baby and Fluvanna Firearms.
What was the first one?
Bump to Baby. It's a 4D, 3D ultrasound experience for expectant mothers. It's really interesting. We didn't have any live examples that day, but it looked neat. So, and also Fluvanna Firearms.
Yeah, so
This-
that business is actually in the Zion Crossroads area,
Mhm.
and the Fluvanna Firearms is in the Fort Union area.
This Saturday, we have a 5-year anniversary celebration and ribbon cutting for Sacred Acre Farms over off of the Parkway here. I was get the numbers reversed. I just say this row.
St.
Um,
Madison Highway.
and so there are several milestone anniversaries for businesses this year, so I will start reporting them as they're happening. Cunningham Creek Winery hit 6 years last week. There's a couple others that are coming up that we've been working with. Another thing to report on is the Quad County Summit. That will be October 12th at Shenandoah Crossing Resort. And it's a great experience. If you have not been before or you're not familiar with it, they also have a pitch competition, of which I think we had a Fluvanna County business win one year. So again, it'll be October 12th, Shenandoah Crossing Resort. More to come on that. I'll make sure that everybody gets
Are
the
they,
information.
are they asking for money?
They are asking for money. They haven't asked for it from the EDA, but they are asking for the chamber's support again. So I was gonna table that. I have a note at the bottom to ask you. And that's all I have at this point on my list. I do have one final thing from the county administrator's office. If you remember back in December, Steve Milroy from the Virginia Investment Pool Program presented some information on how to invest that $35,000 to the EDA. And the current interest rates are around 1.5%.
Yeah, more or less.
And so just wanted to check in on that to see if that's something that the EDA is interested in
Yeah,
doing.
I think we need to add that to our bylaws as well.
Okay,
And then we can take a vote on it. To put the money in there. So some backstory on that, the county,
Could you tell me the name of the thing?
the Virginia Investment Pool,
Thank you.
that, the county for a number of years was not doing anything with their, excess general fund. And 8 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that, they decided that they needed to actually invest the money. And so they stood up the county finance board, which is really an odd way to call 3 people, but that's what they call it. The sitting chair of the board of supervisors, the county treasurer, and a citizen rep make up the board. And they oversee and direct the investments of the county's excess money that's not being used in the operating fund. I happen to be the representative from the citizens on that, and we have been investing now for about the last 6 years. So, and it has put some money back in the county's coffers. It's not very much. We had a pretty dry spell there when interest rates were 0. But the Virginia Investment Pool, I mean, we made like $21,000 last month. So it's a way for us to do something with $35,000, $70,000 that we're sitting on that's doing nothing. So it's something we definitely want to have a conversation about, and if it makes sense, move forward with doing that. Okay, thanks. Back to you.
You said 71,000?
Yeah, we have 35,000 and, well, 61,000 now. 35 and 26.
so that's all I have. I'm not sure if it belongs in our bylaws. I will check with Jim
Okay.
Bowling, but I think it goes in that rules of procedure
Okay,
document. But I'll double check on that because that also needs to
I
be.
thought that was the bylaws.
No, so there's separate. There's separate bylaws, but then there's also rules of procedure, and those are usually related to, motions and meetings.
So I know in order to
Finance.
invest it for the county side, they needed to have the ordinance that gave us permission to do it.
Right.
So I don't know how that plays out with us.
We do not do ordinances, we do resolutions.
Okay,
So we can, it's probably a resolution.
okay, if you
Yeah.
could figure out what it is we have to do.
Yeah.
so we
Oh,
can do it.
it might be better for us to set up a call, Jim, and that way we can introduce them to what we want to do.
Okay.
And I'll get with you after the
Okay.
meeting and we'll figure out who needs to be in there.
And next up, any questions for Jen, especially from you folks? Okay. Ed Tech report? Do we have one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the first part of it is.
Let me back up for just a second. So Ed Tech is the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee for the county. And we have a rep that sits on that committee. And in this case, Lois is our rep to that committee.
I am secretary of EDA, I am secretary of EdTech. So here's the minutes. All right, this, I'm gonna cut out a whole bunch of stuff, basically, EdTech canceled their meeting that was supposed to follow our meeting, because theirs starts at 6, ours starts at 5, so obviously we can't, so they canceled it. Next one is gonna be August the 8th. Aaron Spitzer announced that the fair will be August the 18th, 19th, and 20th. Nina Monroe, who is the chair of EdTech, said the members of EdTech will volunteer at the fair, as well as Andy Sorrell, who used to be the prior chair in home arts. And Aaron Spitzer is seeking to be paid workers to do parking and cold beer. He also announced the state champion bike race with 600 to 1,000 participants will be the Saturday before the fair. The race is a 9-mile route and will have time trials. There will be media coverage and a food truck. Jennifer has organized EdTech into 3 projects. One is the Palmyra Village sign, the Fork Union business map, and the courthouse restoration. The Palmyra Village sign has been approved by the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
And it has been installed. It's down in the little, when you turn onto the road down here.
A picture of the sign follows. Okay. The Fork Union Business Map had a focus group meeting. They discussed business diversity, ESRI, Central Virginia partnerships, verifying businesses and boundaries, identifying the comprehensive area and remote call out area, collecting contact information and their permission to do the contact information, creating the map with QRs and delivering to deliver the map to the retailers. The courthouse restoration will be reported at a later time. The 2 ladies, the historical ladies, were both absent. The signage group will take on a new project, a stage at the park.
It's a very busy committee. They have no authority to do anything.
But they're a good, really
It's
nice
really-
group of
And,
people.
and they actually wind up getting a lot of stuff done, but they don't have any authority, so they're just advisory. Okay, anything else, Lois?
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, at this time, I'd like to open the meeting up for any public comments. Curtis, you're actually on the agenda, so you won't be in public comments unless you want to talk now too. Ms. Booker, anything you want to?
This was the best one for me to attend.
It was a good one.
Lots of information. Goodness, 101, I got the basics. I just finished a FOIA test. And you all got the best way to have people sit and look at you and you can ask questions. We did it on a computer. We just read it and went through it and then signed off. You had someone sitting here to help you through it and you could have questions. That's good. So I learned a lot just from what she had said. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Anything else? Any other public comments? Hearing none, I'll close public comments. We have no unfinished business to address. So finally, we can get to the meat of the meeting, which is the election of officers and presentation by Mr. Putnam of some ideas and then the approval of the 22-23 budget. We have 4 officers for the authority: chair, co-chair, secretary, and treasurer. The current people filling those positions are Rudy Garcia as the chair, Valerie Palamountain as the co-chair, Lois Mastro as the secretary, and Ben Hudson as the treasurer. All 4 of those officers have agreed to stay on if elected. So what we need to do at this time is have a motion and a second for each position. And then we'll vote on each position as it comes up. So let's start with the chair position.
Randy, comment, please.
Sure.
Usually at this time, they also re-up the representative to EdTech too, and that gets filtered on.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
so we also have the ed tech position to vote on as well. And I didn't ask Lois if she wanted to stay on as ed tech, so
Sounds good. It hasn't changed
it's another meeting. All right, so we need a motion and a second for the chair position.
I motion to re-elect Rudy Garcia as chair. Of the EDA.
Are there any other nominations from the floor besides the one presented in the motion? Okay, hearing none, call for a vote on the chair position. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair abstains. 5-0-2. Okay, for the co-chair position. Need a motion and a second.
I motion for Valerie.
I'll second that.
Second by Josh. Any other nominations from the floor at this time? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, 6-0-0-6-0-1. Motion and a second for the secretary position.
Can I motion myself?
Absolutely, you can.
Yeah, I move that Louis Nessville remain as secretary for the authority.
Need a second?
I second.
Second by Loretta.
Thank you, Loretta. Thank you.
Any nominations from the floor? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. 6-0-1. And finally, for the treasurer position, I need a motion and a second.
I motion, Ben. I second.
Any further nominations from the floor? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor for Ben as to continue as treasurer, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, 6-0-1. And finally, need a motion and a second for Lois to continue as the ed tech representative.
So moved.
Josh makes a motion, Ben seconds. Any other nominations from the floor? Hearing none, all in favor of Lois maintaining her responsibilities? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
What are you looking at me for?
Any other nominations from the floor? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, 6-0-1. Thank you, officers, for agreeing to serve another year. We accomplished a lot last year. And let's keep that momentum moving forward. And having said that, Curtis is going to give us some ideas to keep our momentum moving forward.
All right,
And Jennifer, you got a presentation for him?
do you have it on your computer?
I don't think that, it's
Well-
probably hidden in my email.
Well, then, don't.
You have it on the web, yay.
Don't worry, it's on here.
Oh, good.
That's
And
right, because I.
it's,
thought-
says, I think it's, the file says the future.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. I'll add it and then I'll give you the clicker.
So Curtis, while we're waiting on that, let everybody know how long you were on the EDA.
Well, let's see now, I retired in 2011, so it would have been 12 when I got on. I spent some interesting time with those guys that were on the board before us. And they were really, really a nice group of guys. But unfortunately, when they changed the requirements, some of them didn't want to disclose their financial dealing and bowed out. Then I made a little presentation back in 2019, and this chair asked me to step in as chair for the next couple of years. And I said, okay, and I always thought it was just a villain spot, but we had a good time and we did some interesting things. We started a grant program with Lois's help and Valerie's help and did a program for folks. Did you find it?
Which one is it?
It's no. You didn't get on there? Oh, hell. It's an Excel file, but that's not it.
You want to talk about the draft budget a little bit?
Right after him.
Go scroll on down.
That's it.
All right, well.
Here, give me the,
anyway.
thumb drive. Or better yet, I'll just forward this to you, Jenna.
Okay,
Can you get to your email?
yeah, but I'm gonna have to turn the screen off
Okay.
to get to it. So I have to remote back in.
Well,
Oh, here,
anyway,
just
well,
give me the thumb drive then, I'll just.
all right, here you go. But while that's all taken care of, I'm gonna give you a little anecdote. A little kind of reason why I'm doing this, okay? First of all, y'all are uniquely positioned. You've got some great resources in this room, especially Ms. Booker here. I'm very glad she could be here today. And to kind of give me some ideas on this program that I'm coming up with and see if it's something that I should go forward with. I'd be honored if the board took it up as their own, but I'm, looking to do this on my own and form a little program. If the board doesn't want to go along with it, should say.
Oh, I'm waiting for Rudy.
Well, at any rate, the story goes like this. I was a farm boy and I always grew up thinking I was going to be a farmer because that's all my friends were farmers, all the neighborhood were farmers, everybody was farmers. So I thought I was going to grow up to be a farmer. Well, my dad had different ideas. He wanted me to go to college because he saw that I was a little brighter than my brother. Anyway, so he made it so that I could go to college. And so I was going to be a chemist. I wanted to be a chemist. I had a fun time with chemistry classes in high school. I thought that's where I wanted to go. So I get to college and I'm going, heck, after 2 years of it, and my grades were really horrible. I'm never going to get into grad school. I'm never going to be a research chemist. And I went to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, that's why I'm here. And so he says, well, take an aptitude test. So I took an aptitude test. And my aptitude came back for the best aptitude was for a psychologist. Well, I'm an old farm boy. I didn't know what a psychologist did. I had no clue, not a clue. And actually, I probably would have made a really good psychologist along the way. So I decided to go into sociology because that looked like a good career. Well, the year that I graduated from my college alone graduated enough people in sociology to fill every available position in the United States. Okay, and all these other colleges are doing the same. So I ended up in unemployment just about because I ended up, well, this little story, but that I ain't going to go into that. But the reason for this program is call it ideas, and is to get kids a little more exposure to different types of employment opportunities, career opportunities, training opportunities, things that they never thought of and that probably didn't get exposed to, but their parents. Now the I stands for inclusive, right? You find it? And I stands for inclusive, and we want to include everybody in the opportunities that are available. Everybody. And All right, D stands for, you find it?
Yeah, there it is on the bottom, right under the Fluvanna County report.
Future, there it is, right there.
This one?
Either
The
one,
future.
they're the same one.
PowerPoint, yeah, that's good, okay. And, not working?
It's- That's right. Okay. Yeah, my computer's not.
But anyway, D stands for something.
There it is.
There we are, okay, that's helpful, thank you. And, you got a clicker for me?
I do. The problem is, yes, give me 2 seconds.
Okay,
I only have 3 ports, USB ports, and they're literally full with the. We're improvising.
oh, okay, all right, I got you.
There.
All right. So what you, okay, all right, so I have ideas to give other people ideas, all right? And what I'm thinking about is going into give kids in sixth grade, starting them off with learning about study skills, because lots of folks don't go, you know, their parents can't teach them study skills. And sometimes in elementary school, the elementary stuff doesn't fly in high school. It just doesn't qualify as a study process. All right, let's see where we're going.
Give me just 2 seconds.
Okay.
I've gotta share
And-
with Valerie.
Okay, all right, and so I had this idea to do this, and well, we're gonna go through this here. Let's see. Okay, let's see, where are we going back? Okay, there we go. Let's go back to the beginning, because I like this picture, okay? And I like the fact that the mom's kissing the baby, and the program is to lift up the mom. Okay, and not uplift, but to lift up, to bring people up to equity. All right, give others ideas. So it's inclusive. We want to include everybody in the opportunities that are available. Diverse, because we want everybody who's in this program to see themselves in this program. Whether they're, you know, ethnic or background or the economic background or whatever, it's going to include them in diverse equity, okay? And a lot of people don't understand equity. When I first heard it, I didn't know what it was either. It's not equality, because you can give everybody a bicycle. That's equality. But if you give everybody a bicycle that fits them, that's equity, because they can have something that they can use. Let's see here, we're going next. Here we go. All right, access. All right, we want universal access to resources. People need resources, because when I graduated from college, I had nothing but a degree. I didn't have any connections to anybody else anywhere. I had a college degree that I could have done things with, but I didn't know what to do with it. You know, and so access to all kinds of information that they need to make career goals, support them through the process of education so that they get to where they want to be. And all right, so that's ideas. Now, what it is, it's a mentorship program for rising sixth grade students and beyond. So what we want to do is provide them with tutors, role models. We want to teach strategies, establish goals and aims, provide options for the future. Because if we do this at an early age, they can try on different things. We can show them, we can take and go and give a program with different occupations, different careers, different career paths, entrepreneurs, all sorts of things we can show them to give them options for the future. All right, money management skills, saving investment strategies, all this stuff that I never got in high school. Never got it in college either. So I had to come up with all this stuff on my own, how to make, keep and balance the budget even. Because that's part of being successful. And a lot of kids, if they're living from hand to mouth, they don't know anything about budget. All they know is that the food comes when the paycheck comes. And so we want to, what I'm suggesting is we follow them through from 7th grade to 12th grade. And match up their training with their goals. Okay, not everybody needs to go to college. Not everybody wants to go to college. A lot of people shouldn't be in college. Some people should be in trade school. Somebody should be in specialized education. Right now, a hot topic is drone pilots. Those, that's a hot program right now. So specialized education can give a child an opportunity to be successful. All right. So some resources would be teachers, guidance counselors, PVCC, small business development center, CIC. But I'm kind of here, I have 3 questions for you. All right. First of all, do you think this program is needed? What would you say, Ms. Booker?
Yeah, yes, and some parts of your program may be already in action. So you'd have to find out what is already being done and then implement what you see that maybe missing.
Mhm. And what do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I was gonna say I know Mr. Gary Greenwood at the high school has a program outside of 8 to 4
Mhm.
that does something similar to this.
Mhm.
But I don't know whether he touches, like Mr. Booker just said, you have to find out where the overlap.
Okay, all right.
And then cover what's not overlap.
That's why I'm here, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. If it's
Yeah, so
already-
Gary's doing the personal finance and personal financial management piece.
Who's that?
Gary
Gary.
Greenwood, yeah.
Okay.
But
But
is it for everyone?
So at the high school level, there's a requirement that they all do it now.
Yeah, but I suppose what I'm talking about, now Gary teaches marketing and financing at the high school. I'm not talking about that. He runs another program
Okay.
outside of that,
Okay.
that covers
that-
some of this, but I don't know. I don't
That's
know.
something I'm thinking about, is whether this should be in the school or after school type program. So that's another consideration as far as what that goes. Now, the second question would be, I should have written this down. Okay. But
Can I ask a question?
yes,
With the inclusivity, does that include those that are homeschooled and private schooled in the county?
I would say yes. I would say yes. Because if we do this, especially outside the school, we could bring in anyone we want to. So that would kind of give us a little glitch there. We have to have someplace to have the courses, things like that, and do some more advertising to get people into it. Like I said, just a half-baked idea right now, but I wanted to bounce it off of you, to get your ideas. Is there, the second question was, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to get these kids to the programs and goals that they need?
I guess how early can you really start with these kids?
Well-
6, maybe 4, 5. I mean, just trying to get them in the idea of thinking things.
You think that early?
I think so. I mean,
Age or grade?
age.
4 or 5 years old.
Yes, a lot of kids at a younger ages are learning to count and multiply and divide, and they're using all these extra activities, extra courses outside of school to learn. I mean, it's just bringing them familiar with what's going on, and then as they grow into other grades and other ages, they're still learning.
Yeah.
So Junior Achievement has done something similar with a bunch of the pieces of it
Mm-hmm.
at different places where they actually build like a model city, model downtown where the kids come in and they start their little businesses and they do all that stuff. So that's a model that's out there but it doesn't cover the component I think is really key, and that's the studying component.
Study
Fort Union has that
and.
with their one subject plan,
Mhm.
but we don't really, I don't know that we teach study skills
No.
anywhere anymore.
And that was one thing my mom did for me. When I got in seventh grade, she sat me down at her desk and said, this is the way you do it. And if the parents don't know
They can't tell.
and nobody else teaches you, you go into high school, you go through high school. You don't attend, you go through it, they pass you through. And you end up out on the street,
Mhm.
hustling. God knows what else. You know?
Rudy, you know, the high school, and extension agency used to have a program for 11th graders
Mhm.
where they would have bankers, daycare people around the gymnasium. And they gave the children what their salary was, how many children they had, and they had to go and take that money and budget away. You gotta go get your groceries. Some of them are smart enough to get married to somebody so that they'd have a bigger pot of money. That was an excellent program, but it was in the 8th, 11th grade.
Right,
I
and
just-
sometimes
You
it's,
can do that.
you can do some things like that, but it's a little bit too late by that.
Yeah, it's late, they needed, we talked about doing it at the 8th grade level,
Mhm.
and then maybe advance it as you go. 8th grade, you
Yeah.
can do one by the time you've got. So there's so many good ideas
Yeah.
that are missing that we need to.
Okay,
That would be through the.
Valerie,
guidance
can I bring you
counselors.
in on this?
Ask
She-
Rudy.
Valerie?
Ask Rudy who at Fort Union runs the study plan.
The guidance counselor does it there, and the commandant's department does it. But it's not a formal program like what Curtis is talking about, right?
I'd like to set it up so that, you know, we know from this year to next year to next year what we're gonna do with these kids. And if we can incorporate it in the schools, that'd be even better, but if we can't, we could do it as a standalone program. That's what I'm thinking.
Transportation.
And Valerie, have you been following along?
Oh, yeah.
What's your impression of this?
Someone mentioned that, that teaching financial literacy is actually in Virginia Code of Law. It has to be included before, in order for a student to graduate from high school. I believe they're teaching it in the 11th grade. With things like study skills and things like that, the difficulty is when is it going to be taught? Because if it's not in school, trying to recruit kids to come to an after-school program is going to be very difficult. And then the second part of it is, would we be paying teachers to take this on as an additional load? Or are we going to rely on volunteers? If we're relying on volunteers, I would suggest talking to a service organization, Rotary or somebody like that, if they're interested. So that's where I'm falling is, is this an EDA function? We just went through an hour and a half of training on what an EDA did.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I see this group as uniquely qualified to give me some direction on this. And I think you have great ideas so far with it. And I think going to civic organizations and such as that with it is a great idea. I had kind of intended to do that.
There are funds available to the schools, Perkins in particular. And we might be able to use Perkins funds to do this, or the schools might be able to use Perkins funds to do this.
Okay,
Fluvanna actually has an outstanding reputation for preparing students for the job market. They get very high grades from employers. So that I would suggest talking to somebody like Brenda Gillum. Or I don't know who's in charge of CTE these days at the schools,
I
but
think Don Stribling's,
okay, Don. All right.
Yep.
I would suggest talking to them and finding out what additional resources they need
okay.
and where are the gaps? And like I I think it was Loretta who said that, starting at a younger age is better. And I agree with that. Usually we start talking about careers, not careers like, what do you, but, the question of what do you want to be when you grow up usually comes at an early age, 5, 6 years old, 7 years old. So there's, in second grade, and they start thinking about what they want to be. And I swear, all of them will start, all the boys will say they want to be on Manchester United, and all the girls, so their ideas are going to be, really kind of silly, but it's getting them started, wanting to be a soccer star and going into sports medicine is not a huge leap. It sounds like a huge leap, but it's not for these kids. So that would be my suggestion, is if this is something that can be embedded in the school day, and get service organizations, civic organizations to volunteer. The biggest issue with the school, if you bring them into the school, then they have to go through the security clearance, the background checks, not security, but background checks. So, but the more resources we can give these kids, the better.
There's Waggy Labs. They do this in Charlottesville. What a great idea, Labs.
Yeah.
And they
Yes.
set up different stations for kids and help them. I think they start at like 10,
Yeah.
and they help them decide at like, and they can keep going through the program. It's a summer program, and they can continue through it each year and grow with whatever career they might, like if they want to be a veterinarian, they might explore being a veterinarian. You could look into, I'm not saying like that you couldn't do it here. I'm just saying that might be somebody to model an idea for.
So I've got a lot more groundwork to do. I can see that, right?
Maybe so.
Yeah, I know.
And
that.
Curtis, you may want to consider starting a pilot project
Mhm.
with a handful of kids,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Because that may let you test some theories out, and I'm sure you can find a handful of parents who would say, yes, thank you for the help.
Yeah.
I got a 5-year-old.
You got a 5-year-old? Okay.
There
Well,
you
thank
go,
you for
get
your
your
time.
first
My
sign.
third question is, who would like to help me?
I'd be open to exploring it a little further. I'm
Okay.
pretty involved with the
I
school.
know what to do it at the high school. you know.
All right, well, thank you so much, and thank you for your time. This has been a long meeting. I appreciate it, have a great time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. Great ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Curtis.
I love the name of it.
Yeah, I do too.
And maybe just refine the pitch.
So I am passing out to you a proposed budget for this coming fiscal year. It's pretty down and dirty. We don't have a lot of revenue coming in. We're anticipating about $4,000 in revenue. And we put together a budget with about $3,400 in expenditures. And the reason this is important is because we have a requirement to document all of our spend. And have that approved by the board of directors every time we spend. What we found is that it gets to be a bit tedious if you don't have pre-approved spends for the treasurer and the chair to be able to go out and do the business of the organization. So we're putting in front of you a budget that would authorize up to these amounts without having to get an additional approval from the board before the funds are expended. So having said that, I will open it up for any discussion.
Question,
Mhm.
the projected income of the Montessori school in the region 10.
Those are
What are-
bonds.
Okay, so that's money that we've loaned out.
Yeah, well, we don't loan the money out. We signed off on the bond.
Okay,
So, because we don't have any money to loan.
what's the relation to us giving a bond for that?
We have a bond issuing authority.
Okay,
And so at some point in the past, they came to us and we issued this bond on their behalf, and then they got it funded by a bank, and Now they pay us a fee every year.
Got it. So like a trustee kind of situation?
No, it's an origination fee. Good question. We just tap certain businesses to give us money. I wish.
Let's try to figure it out.
It's related to those same bonds that Sandy was talking about earlier.
Private bond.
Yeah.
So is the goal to get more of those or?
Yeah, the goal would be, always be to get more of those, but the market's been, like she into it, that the market's just been kind of easy, so people haven't needed the bonds that a locality can issue or an authority can issue.
Okay.
The last one we did was the Soccer Association of Charlottesville.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Could we look at what we charge them?
Yes, we absolutely can.
Not the ones that are already done.
Right,
Moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's in your
so-
rules of procedure.
but
Yes.
we probably should do it beforehand instead of, someone approaches us and.
But
say,
that's
"Oh, I'm
what, that's
sorry,
part of
we're
the,
not-"
that's part of the documents we need to update, Lois,
Okay.
which is the bylaws and the rules of procedure,
Mhm.
which I thought they were the same.
No.
Okay, Josh,
So I know this, I've been part of this group for like 2.5 hours, so.
okay.
So there's a pretty big jump from last year to this year. If
Um,
I'm reading this correctly on the expenses, right? The expenses versus budget. And it looks like the two big jumps are in the ops funds and also in the Fluvanna review ads,
And the third one was in the last line, that was Department of Treasury,
right?
that should have been paid in June, but we're paying it in July. So next year, when it rolls around, that 500 will actually be paid in June.
So it'd be actually part of this, so
Yeah,
technically it's twice part of this budget, is what you're saying,
Well, I didn't reflect it in the 2022,
okay,
but it should have been, in a perfect world, it
Right.
would have been paid in June.
okay.
and same thing with the ads.
Yeah, so-
Those ads were,
So technically they're last year expense, we're just.
Exactly.
And then just, explain the difference.
And that, we pay that annually. For the Fluvanna review.
About that.
Yeah.
The only thing that's not annually, and it's kind of, sorry, it was the, Oxford operational fund.
and talk about a little bit about what that is, Ben.
The operational funds is practically, and I'll give you one example, last year when we did the, vendors fair.
Right.
Part of the operational funds was to support the vendors fair, in addition to some other stuff. In doing that, I had volunteered to take on a role in that, and I had to go and make some signs, some signage for the vendor fair, and that cost was $75 and change. Ideally, I would have gotten that approved through the directors prior to spending that $75. But what ended up happening was, because we didn't have a budget, I spent the money, then came back to the board to have it approved. But had it been in the budget as part of the operation funds
It would have been pre-approved expenditure.
from the beginning of the fiscal year.
And then on the income side, so you said it's the bond origination fee,
Mhm.
is that actually our total cash, like the $1,000 from Saka? Is that
Yes.
actually, so there's more bond that they're paying, we're just keeping 1,000 of?
No, so we charge an origination fee and then we charge an annual fee. So as long as the bond stays in place, as long as they're paying on it, they pay us $1,000 a year.
Okay, so they're not paying $100,000 and we're keeping 10 or 1,000 of that?
No.
Okay.
That's a set fee.
And do we know, like, in projecting it out, do we know how much longer we're gonna receive these, or is
We
it going to
can,
be?
we can look at it, and have our lawyer pull the documents for us and then tell us how long it's supposed to be. But it's kind of a crapshoot because they can refinance out of the bond at any time. So we can know what the best case scenario is, but we don't know what the worst case scenario is.
Yeah, just be curious on what that actual curve is, as we're looking at the money, and obviously, they anticipate if they keep it, if they pay on it for another 25 years or whatever the amount is, we at least know, and then, or if it's 2 years left, and now that $1,000 is going to drop off, how are we gonna supplement our income, going forward?
Yeah, and that's the $24,000 question.
Okay.
How do we supplement our income?
Right, and perhaps I missed it, but and I'm asking it, have we looked at other ways to generate income other than doing bond issues? Like, what other ways do we have to actually to bring money other than the county giving us $1,000 or doing a bond? Like, what other opportunities do we have?
Grants,
What's that?
grants.
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 Yeah, so we picked up a $10,000 grant because of work Curtis and Lois and Valerie did. But that was restricted money. We could only use it for what the grant said we could use it for. And what we did with that is we provided scholarships to 14 businesses to attend the Community Investment Collaborative course. And then we held a pitch contest and we awarded another $8,000 in awards to 2 of those businesses. So we had a major impact on 14 businesses in the county.
What's a healthy budget for our size county and the amount of business?
Bigger than what we got,
I'm sorry.
bigger than what we
But I
got.
mean, what's the
don't
projection? We
think-
don't know.
I don't think that there's a standard,
Okay.
you know, you come from a county like she came from in Suffolk, you know, they are given buildings that they manage and
No, they built them.
they built them.
They built them.
There you go.
The EDA did?
But
They
they
have
had to come up-
$45 million in assets.
But that money came from someplace to start with.
Right. So people donated or?
No.
No.
Their county
strictly
board of
grant?
supervisors authorized it.
It's an independent city, but
It's town council,
city council.
city council.
Several different ways. So that you can, they were donating some land from Planters Peanuts. Planters is headquartered in Suffolk. So they were donating some land and they turned it into industrial park. They parceled it off, did the master planning and sold it acre by acre. That was one way that they generated some money. And then he's right, in other ways, that it was like a tit for tat. So they literally redeveloped Main Street. They were given one building. They built a building separate, then they were given that building to backfill. And once they did that, they sold the property here. And they did that several times. So they've generated money, but they also make a lot of money in their bonds because they host Sentara Hospital. So that generates about $138,000 a year. Just for one bond. So it depends on your bonds too, right? But they also have several.
Yeah, and our bond authority is pretty low. You know, I think it's 10 million.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the things that we've looked at is when they build the new county admin building. Give them turning this building over to the EDA. If there's no other need for it or parts of this building and then using that to generate income. There's a couple of other buildings that the county currently owns that they're not using. That might also be on the table. It's just a matter of negotiating with them and getting the board of supervisors to understand that allowing us to generate some revenue will allow us to generate more activity. And what we're faced with is supervisors who just don't understand that spending money isn't necessarily always bad. Sometimes spending money is an investment to generate future revenue. And we've just got a couple of supervisors who don't see things that way. They see any spend by government as being not necessary. So it's our job to continue to educate them as much as we can.
I see it's the bond authority to me.
What?
Why is the bond authority 10 million?
It's
It's
by
a-
statute,
IRS.
no, by Virginia code.
It's IRS.
Is it IRS? Okay.
Yeah.
So why are we 10 million and somebody else like Suffolk?
Yeah, I think. it
No,
has-
no, no, that was a different bond. So you have a $10 million cap on private, tax exempt private bonds that she was talking about.
Okay.
But then there's other bonds that are higher. And it's kind of one of those regional ones because, you know, Sentara Hospital is all in Hampton Roads. Like there's a chicken in every pot, you know, there's one in
Right.
every city. So they refinanced all their hospitals together. And that's how it got so high, because Suffolk was the host city that year, whenever it was.
Yeah.
So it just depends. But to Rudy's point, I think, there are some really good opportunities moving forward with our economic development programming to potentially, I would love to see us get a site, us as the EDA, get a site ready and develop it, what does that look like? So I think that there's opportunity
And you want it located where the site.
Who cares?
in Fluvanna County.
Why you design crossroads or what? What's the
There are a couple different things in the pipeline right now in the area, in the development world, from literally forking and Greenville Buff all the way up to, so it could be somewhere, anywhere, I think that we're on a good path forward.
And depending on how the county decides to slice and dice the business park in Fort Union, that could become an EDA responsibility.
Mhm.
But in order to do that, you gotta have staff, you gotta have resources, and so we'll see what happens.
Do we work with the chamber?
Yes. We have, up until now, we've had a very strong relationship with the chamber, considering that I've been the president of the chamber.
Okay.
And my goal is to continue that relationship with them. I roll off the board in October. But find somebody on the chamber who was.
Can I make a small comment?
Mhm.
This information is like 20+ years old, so I apologize for the oldness of it. But back then I did a 501(c)(3) foundation for a school system. And we wrote grants. The teachers wrote grants for the school system, but in the foundation. And then the foundation maintained and monitored the grants. And so we made money that way. Because obviously the teachers can't get paid for writing the grants, and then we up the teachers' salaries. I don't know if that's.
Again,
Go
that goes
anymore?
back, that's resource driven, right? We could do all sorts of things if we had
But
enough
it was
resources.
paying for itself is what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, right, but you have to have something to seed the pot with, right? You have to have some money to start with, because somebody has to do the initial work that starts to generate the revenue.
The deal was with the teachers that they said, look, you write the grant. You have to approve the grant, but you write the grant and you will get a percentage.
I don't see that there's anything that would stop us from doing that.
And I don't know if it's legal anymore. I don't, how they always close loopholes.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we should look at approving this budget. Obviously, we're not gonna come up with the
Yeah.
ideas all tonight. And maybe we can start to, as we have our meetings, maybe we'll start to think of ideas that we can make this a little bit more aggressive and not just eking out the budget every single year.
I also think, if I can add my 2 cents, that we have to come up with, where are we going to spend this money? Because we've had 30-some thousand dollars in our bank account forever. And what is the purpose of getting more money if we're not going to, how are we going to use it?
Yeah, that's a good point, Valerie, and we have been much more aggressive in the last 4 years than we had been in the last 25 years. And we're still trying to get the county to release the $35,000 that they have under restricted.
Yep.
So were they to release that, it would give us a little bit more opportunity to do some stuff.
I think what we need to do is give them a plan. And that's what we're working on with the strategic plan.
Right.
So I think right now our hands are a little bit tied, but we're moving in the right direction. It's slow progress.
I make the motion that we approve the budget as presented.
Okay. have a
When
motion?
you, in your motion, can you read the estimate, or I'm sorry, the income and the expenses? That's, I know, but just, you don't have to read them all, just the bottom line figure.
Josh, would you please let me ask her a question before we move
Sure,
on? Okay.
absolutely.
Sandy had talked about all these different kind of grants, and obviously we do not have working knowledge of all these different kind of grants. Is there some way to get someone that says, look, this would be a good way to do this kind of bond and do this kind of grant? Remember I asked her, what's the name of all the different kind of grants? Yeah, which one of those could we possibly click into and raise money, as Josh wants us to raise all?
I think it's kind of getting back to Valerie's point. We've got to have a project, like we've got to have a thing. So until we identify that thing that we really want to do, like a facade grant program, I would love to have a facade grant program. Or a signage program.
Oh, signage.
Mhm. Signage or facades, either one, they can't actually commingle. Until we identify that thing, we can't go get the.
Yeah,
money.
and remember, any of those grants that we go after, those are all, gonna-
Grants or bonds, I don't care where we get the
Right.
money, but.
But no, there's a
she's
huge
talking about
difference.
different types.
but there's a huge difference, right? If we go after grant money is gonna be restricted in usage,
Right,
right? If we go after more bonds, bond money is unrestricted. So it's to our advantage to have unrestricted money because then we can make decisions on what we
well,
want to
that's
spend it
what
on.
I'm asking. I asked Sandy, what's the name of different kinds of bonds?
So the bonds, and like she's saying, they're dried up right now. People are not, other than your tax exempt bonds that are coming out for, the soccer and for, a library or public facilities bonds. They're not really happening right now. They're not generating a lot. And in some localities, like in Albemarle County, you guys did the bond for the soccer
Mhm.
for Albemarle County because Albemarle was restricting their $10 million capacity for their own public facilities projects. So you can, if they reserve their own, you can't use it because the money is all in one umbrella, if that makes any sense. So
the
there's a
bond-
lot of
The
stipulations
bonds
on that.
are tied up because the interest is so low, so you can attract buyers of the bonds. Is that what you're
It's not that
saying?
you attract, you don't go out marketing bonds, it's a service that's out there that people use. And usually it includes a bond attorney.
I mean, I've
and
done
other
tons
things.
of bonds for school districts, so I understand how that procedure
Right,
works.
but it's not something you really actively go pursue.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Okay.
But that's not gonna help us with the budget for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I agree, we need to have some more revenue.
Well, look, I'm trying to figure out what's, like he says, what are its sources? We do not understand what possible bonds are available for unrestricted funds that we could tap into.
So Jen and I will come up with what we have available. We'll talk to the attorney as well. But we have a very limited pool of money that we can deal with. And then how to market it, I don't know.
Are you talking about the budget again, the limited
No.
pool of money?
No,
The
just,
35,000,
No.
the 61,000?
we have limited bond authority.
Okay, gotcha, 10 million.
Well, yes, and. We'll have a briefing on it at the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion on the table that needs to be restated, Josh.
Yes, sir. So I make a motion that we present the projected EDA proposed budget for years 22-23 with a projected income of $3,970. A projected cost expense of $3,440, showing a net total income of $530 after expenses.
Yes.
And I would take a second on that.
I'll second.
Any further discussion on the budget? Okay, hearing none, I would call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, chair votes aye, 601. Last thing we have to do before we leave is remind everybody when the next meeting is. Valerie, are you in town for the next meeting?
Give me a date.
Gonna be this week in August.
August 8th at 5 p.m.
I'll be here.
Okay, so you're gonna have to run that meeting. I'll zoom in,
Okay,
but you'll have to run the meeting, okay?
So we
okay.
don't
we'll
do the
talk.
first Monday of the month.
It's the second.
All right, entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, anybody opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 7:52. Jesus, that was long.